Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're in the cockpit of a King Air 350, a real workhorse known for its reliability, its versatility. You've done all your prep. But what happens when the unexpected hits? When the aircraft starts talking to you with, lights and warnings, or you find yourself pushing right up against its limits? Our mission today on the deep dive is to, well, cut through the dense technical stuff and pull out the really vital insights into the King Air 350's emergency procedures and its precise operational limits. We want to give you a shortcut to being well-informed, understanding not just what to do, but also the why behind these critical safeguards.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how these details, things that might seem small on their own, like a single speed limit or a warning light that don't exist in isolation, they actually weave together to create this incredibly robust safety net. We're not just looking at a checklist here. We're trying to understand the fundamental purpose behind each critical step, each limit. Our sources for this deep dive, they're essentially excerpts from the King Air 350's pilot training manual. So it's authoritative stuff. It gives us that foundational understanding of the aircraft systems, how it's meant to be flown. This is really the bedrock of safe flight, and we'll try to distill its essence for you.
Exactly. So whether you're a seasoned pilot needing that critical refresher, maybe an aspiring aviator trying to, get ahead of the game, or maybe you're just like me, incredibly curious about how these amazing machines are kept safe when things get complex. Well, this deep dive is for you. We're going to break down some pretty dense information into clear, actionable, and frankly, quite fascinating nuggets of knowledge. Let's kick things off by exploring the aircraft's fundamental boundaries, essentially, the rules of the road for the King Air 350. Every machine, doesn't matter how tough or brilliantly designed, it has its absolute boundaries. For an aircraft like the King Air 350, knowing these operational limitations isn't just, important. It's the first, most fundamental step to staying safe, to ensuring the aircraft's integrity. These aren't just suggestions, are they? They're the bedrock of its safe operation, defined through rigorous testing and certification. So what exactly are some of these critical lines in the sand that define its safe operating envelope, and why are they so crucial for every single flight?
That's a great way to frame it. What often gets overlooked is that these limits aren't really there to restrict the aircraft's capability. It's more about defining the precise envelope where it's certified to operate safely, predictably. Pushing past those limits, even just a little bit, can introduce significant, often unpredictable risks. Risks to the airframe, risks to everyone on board. It's all about operating within the design parameters, the parameters it was built for and tested against rigorously. Okay, let's start with what we call environmental and performance limits. These dictate how the plane can operate under various external conditions, various loads. These factors can dramatically affect safety. For instance, the maximum demonstrated crosswind is 20 knots. Now, it's important to understand this isn't like a hard legal limit you can never exceed, but it represents the highest crosswind the aircraft was proven to handle safely during its certification tests. For a pilot, it's a critical reference point. It signals that as winds get near this value during takeoff or landing, the demands on pilot skill, on aircraft control, they increase significantly. The risk goes up.
And related to wind, there's also a maximum tailwind component. That's for both takeoff and landing, limited to 10 knots. I sort of picture why a tailwind on takeoff isn't great. Feels like it would just push you down the runway faster, maybe hurt your lift. Is that the idea?
Exactly right. A tailwind basically reduces the effective airflow over the wings, which means the aircraft needs to achieve more ground speed to generate the same amount of lift. And that translates directly to needing a significantly longer runway for both takeoff and landing. So that 10-knot limit, it's a crucial safety buffer. It ensures you always have adequate runway performance. We also have very specific maximum operating air temperature limits. The King Air 350 can operate up to ISA, that's International Standard Atmosphere, plus 37 degrees Celsius at or below 25,000 feet. And it's ISA plus 31 degrees Celsius above 25,000 feet. ISA is basically a theoretical model of atmospheric conditions at different altitudes. So these limits are specific temperature deviations from that standard. And there's also a minimum operating air temperature limit of minus 53.9 degrees Celsius. These temperature limits are absolutely critical because temperature directly affects air density. And air density impacts engine performance, wing lift, how various systems operate precisely.
That makes perfect sense. Air density changes everything, right? Engine thrust, lift, it all connects. Okay, beyond those environmental factors, what about weight limitations? This feels like, well, a fundamental aspect of flying anything safely.
It really is. The maximum ramp weight for the King Air 350 is 15,100 pounds. The maximum takeoff weight is 15,000 pounds. Now, that 100-pound difference, it seems small, but it's not a mistake. It's a very carefully calculated safety buffer. It accounts for the fuel you burn just taxiing out before you even start your takeoff roll. It highlights the kind of meticulous planning involved, making sure the aircraft is never overweight at that critical moment of takeoff. But it's not just about that absolute max number. Takeoff weight is also dynamically limited by several other critical factors, things like the weight required to meet takeoff climb gradients, tire speed limits during acceleration, brake energy limits if you have to reject the takeoff, and of course, the available takeoff field length. All these factors are interconnected. They create this holistic safety net. We even have specific weight limits for the baggage compartments. For instance, 510 pounds if you've got the toilet and the fold-up seat installed, or 550 pounds with only the toilet, for the B300C model specifically. These are all about keeping the aircraft's center of gravity within safe limits, maintaining balance.
And the source mentions some extra considerations for commercial operations under something called FAR Part 135. Can you quickly explain what that means for our listeners? What's FAR 135?
Absolutely. So for commercial ops, specifically under FAR Part 135, you can think of it as the strict rule book governing things like air charter services or on-demand air taxis. There are even more stringent limitations. These often relate to takeoff flight path requirements, making sure the aircraft can safely climb, say, to 1,500 feet above the ground, even if an engine fails right after takeoff. And also the single engine service ceiling, how high it can maintain level flight with one engine out. These extra rules are designed to guarantee that even with an engine failure, the aircraft can safely clear obstacles and maintain a minimum climb performance to get to a safe altitude. It adds another layer of safety for paying passengers. Okay, moving on to fuel system limitations. These are equally critical for flight safety and aircraft stability. The maximum allowable fuel imbalance between the wing fuel systems is 300 pounds. Why does that matter? Because if you go beyond that, it can significantly affect the aircraft's lateral stability and control. Makes it harder to fly straight and level. The King Air 350 is approved for standard commercial jet fuels like JDA, JDA1, JTB, and also military grades like JP4, JP5, and JP8. But here's a really critical insight, something that stands out. While the King Air 350 is tough enough to use aviation gasoline avgas in an emergency, there's a strict catch. It's limited to only 150 cumulative hours between engine overhauls. That's a powerful reminder, isn't it? Even approved emergency measures can cause hidden wear and tear on these precise turboprop engines. It's a trade-off pilots absolutely must understand. In emergencies, other avgas grades like 80RD, 919600 green, 100 blue, and 1115, 145 purple are also approved. It's also vital to remember those fuel management numbers you might see on a fancy display, they're advisory only. They must never replace the primary fuel quantity indications from the actual physical gauges in the cockpit. Those gauges, they're your ultimate source of truth for how much fuel you really have.
Okay, let's talk airspeed limitations. The needle on the airspeed indicator, it really doesn't lie here, does it? These are some of the most fundamental limits a pilot has to be constantly aware of. They guide every single maneuver.
Absolutely. These speeds basically define the envelope where the aircraft's structure and control systems are guaranteed to work as designed, without risking structural damage or loss of control. First up is maneuvering speed, or VA. That's 182 kCAS, knots calibrated airspeed, corrected for instrument errors, or 184 KIS, knots indicated airspeed, what you actually see on the gauge. The critical note here, and it's underlined in the manual, do not make full or abrupt control movements. This speed, VA, is the absolute maximum speed at which you can make full or abrupt control inputs without risking structural damage from excessive aerodynamic loads. Push beyond VA with rapid movements, and you could, quite literally, overstress the airframe.
So it's not just about the speed itself, but how you handle the controls at that speed. Interesting. What about air minimum control speed, VMCA? I see that distinctive red line at 94 KIS on the airspeed indicator diagram.
VMCA, yes, that red line. It's the minimum airspeed at which the aircraft can still be controlled directionally and laterally, with one engine out and the other engine running at takeoff power. It's a truly critical speed, especially if you have an engine failure during takeoff or climb, because it ensures you have enough airflow over the rudder to counteract that asymmetrical thrust from the good engine. If you fly slower than VMCA in that situation, you risk losing directional control, a very dangerous place to be. The flap operating ranges are also key for safely managing speed and lift, especially during takeoff and landing. The airspeed indicator isn't just one needle, it's marked with colored arcs in a triangle. These aren't just decorative, they're immediate visual cues for the pilot. They guide you through the safe speed ranges for different flap settings. The white arc that goes from 81 to 158 KIS indicates the full flap operating range. Within that, the wide white arc, 81 to 96 KIS, represents the range starting from the stalling speed at max weight with flaps down. while the narrow weight arc, 96 to 148 kis, extends up to the maximum speed you can fly with flaps extended beyond the approach setting. And finally, there's a white triangle at 202 kis. That signifies the maximum speed you can fly with approach flaps deployed. Each of these markings defines specific flap configurations and their associated safe speeds, instantly telling you how fast or slow you can go without overstressing things or risking a stall.
And that unmistakable blue line, the single-engine best rate of climb speed, VYSE, sitting there at 125 kis. That sounds incredibly important if an engine quits.
It's absolutely vital. VYSE is the speed where the aircraft gets the best altitude gain over time with one engine out. Maintaining this precise speed after an engine failure, especially during takeoff or climb out, is crucial. It helps you clear obstacles and get to a higher, safer altitude efficiently. It's really the sweet spot. It balances minimizing drag from the dead engine with maximizing climb performance in a critical situation.
Here's a safety item that just jumps off the page for me. It's so direct, it almost feels like a warning shouted from the manual. Do not lift the power levers in flight. Lifting them below flight idle could result in a nose-down pitch and a descent rate that could lead to aircraft damage and injury to personnel. Wow. What makes this warning so critical, so absolute?
That is a critical, absolute safety item, because those power levers, they control not just engine thrust, but also the pitch of the propeller blades. Moving them below the flight idle position, or worse, into the ground fine or reverse range while you're airborne, that would instantly and drastically change the aerodynamic forces on the props. Imagine like trying to slam on the brakes in midair or pushing the props into reverse thrust. The aerodynamic forces could pitch the nose down violently, cause a rapid uncontrolled descent, severe structural stress, potentially catastrophic damage. It's an action strictly reserved for ground operations and for very, very good reason. Lastly, for the landing gear cycle limits, the aircraft is limited. One complete up and down cycle every 5 minutes, for a total of 6 cycles. Then you need a mandatory 15-minute cooldown period. This isn't arbitrary. It's to prevent the hydraulic pump motor and other components from overheating. They work hard moving that heavy gear.
So we've covered the big picture limits, speed, weight, environment. But this isn't just an old school analog machine, right? It's packed with advanced tech. What are the digital brains, the avionics and other systems? Do they also have their own sort of red lines, their own system-specific limitations?
They absolutely do. Take the avionics systems, whether it's the older EFIS 85 glass cockpit or the newer ProLine 21 suite. For instance, before you even think about engaging the autopilot, a satisfactory pre-flight check must be done. That's not just ticking a box. It ensures the system is working correctly, predictably before you rely on it. The TCS Traffic Alert and Collision Avoidance System, well, it won't show you traffic or give you those crucial resolution advisories, those climb or descend commands if your transponder is set to OFF or STBY. Or if altitude reporting is turned OFF ALT, this highlights how these complex safety systems are critically dependent on other, more fundamental aircraft systems working correctly. They're all linked.
And the EGPWS, the Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System, that's a vital safety net for avoiding terrain, but it also has its limits, right? It's not like an infallible navigation tool.
Precisely. EGPWS, while immensely valuable for warning about terrain, is strictly for situational awareness. You must not rely solely on its terrain or obstacle display for navigation. The system's accuracy, its fidelity, they have inherent limits. And its database for man-made obstacles, for example, is primarily limited to North America and Europe. So it's a powerful tool to aid your awareness, but it must never replace careful navigation and pilot judgment. Similarly, the Flight Management System, the FMS, has its own restrictions. For example, you're prohibited from capturing or tracking a DME arc that's a specific curved flight path based on distance measuring equipment outside its published start and end points, and for flying in what's called MNPS airspace, Minimum Navigation Performance Specification airspace. Think high-altitude oceanic routes with very strict accuracy needs. You need either dual FMS GPS systems or single FMS GPS on approved routes with a valid prediction program. This ensures you meet the required accuracy.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of intricate details a pilot needs to manage just for flight planning and execution. What about the IFIS 5000, the Integrated Flight Information System?
The IFIS 5000, another sophisticated tool, is also primarily for situational awareness. Its operator's guide must always be readily available to the crew, and critically, its use for actual navigation or for weather avoidance is not approved. Furthermore, if you're looking at geopolitical data, display ranges below 50 nautical miles shouldn't be used, as the picture might appear erroneous at their shorter ranges. Also, the little airplane symbols shown on electronic charts, strictly prohibited for navigation. And the underlying database for those charts must always be current. You can't fly with old maps. For the Terrain Awareness and Display, or TAD, it must be inhibited, turned off, within 15 nautical miles of airports that aren't in the TADWS Plus database, or when the FMS is in dead reckoning DR mode. This prevents nuisance alerts in areas where the system's data might be incomplete or inaccurate, which should just distract the crew when they need to focus.
Okay, shifting to internal aircraft systems, what are the pressurization limits? That's obviously vital for keeping everyone comfortable and safe at altitude, right? Making sure we can breathe.
Absolutely. The maximum cabin differential pressure is 6.6 psi. Think of that as the maximum pressure difference allowed between the inside of the cabin and the thin air outside at cruising altitude. Exceeding this, even slightly, could structurally overstress the fuselage, potentially leading to, well, catastrophic failure. There are also specific limitations for the pneumatic pressure gauge and the gyro suction gauge. These ensure those systems, which feed things like cabin air and attitude instruments, are operating within their safe, certified parameters.
And the engines themselves, the heart of the aircraft, they have very precise oil temperature and pressure limits. Just like in a high-performance car, keeping the oil right is critical, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. Normal running oil pressure is between 90 and 135 psi. Anything outside that range needs immediate attention, as it directly impacts engine health. Oil temperature limits range from minus 40 degrees Celsius up to plus 110 degrees Celsius, but temperatures between 99 and 110 degrees Celsius are limited to a maximum of 10 minutes. That's not just a number. It means pushing past 99 degrees C is okay only for short bursts. Any longer risks severe engine damage and definitely impacts the engine's long-term life. Starting oil temperature limits are also precisely defined. It needs to be above minus 40 C but below 99 C for a safe start. It's a finely tuned system, and these limits are there to protect the incredibly complex parts inside the engine from excessive wear or, outright damage.
I've heard that propeller D systems need careful handling. The source mentions that prolonged operation when the propellers are static may severely damage the de-ice boots. Why is that such a specific warning?
That's a great question. It's because those de-ice boots, they're essentially rubber covers on the leading edge of the prop blades with heating elements embedded inside. If you run those heaters for too long when the props aren't spinning, the heat gets concentrated in one spot. It can actually cause the rubber boots to melt, burn, or delaminate. It's a key operational detail to prevent expensive, avoidable damage. We also have a note that windshield heat causes erratic operation of the magnetic compass. This is a known electromagnetic interference thing. The compass, while basic and crucial, is susceptible to the magnetic fields generated by those heating elements in the windshield. So expect the needle to wobble a bit when the heat's on. Finally, the cockpit door. It must be closed during takeoff, landing, and flight in icing conditions. This is often for structural integrity in case of a rapid decompression, or just to maintain cabin temperature and pressure integrity. A small detail, but a critical one.
So we've mapped out the boundaries, the rules of the road for the King Air 350. But just knowing the limits isn't the whole story, right? How does this sophisticated machine actually talk to you, give you that heads up when you're pushing too hard or when something's genuinely going wrong? This is where the warning and caution systems become your, indispensable co-pilot, constantly monitoring hundreds of things and alerting you when attention is needed. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the plane is constantly communicating.
Building on that, yeah. Once you grasp the physical limits, the next critical piece is, how does the aircraft actually tell you when you're near or past those limits, or when something's amiss? In a complex aircraft like this, how do you ensure critical info gets through? Clearly, unambiguously, and quickly, without just overwhelming the crew with noise. The King Air 350 uses a highly layered, prioritized approach to alerts. From subtle little lights to urgent sounds and flashing warnings. It ensures the crew has immediate awareness of anything developing. It's a carefully designed hierarchy to prevent information overload while highlighting what truly needs attention now. Let's dig into the Master Warning and Caution Advisory System. This is really the core of how the aircraft communicates problems to the crew. Visually, you have these prominent master warning lights. They're red, and master caution lights, which are amber. They're strategically placed in pairs right on the glare shield, directly in the pilot's line of sight, their scan pattern. They work together with numerous individual annunciator panels, which light up with specific messages about the actual problem.
Okay, so if a warning annunciator lights up, say something about an engine issue, what's the sequence? How does the system and the pilot figure out what needs immediate attention versus, something less urgent?
There's a very clear hierarchy of alerts designed for exactly that. When a warning or caution annunciator illuminates, let's say, A red oil press low light comes on its corresponding master warning, red, or master caution, amber light, immediately starts flashing. That flashing is crucial. It grabs your attention instantly. It keeps flashing until a crew member presses the face of either the pilot's or co-pilot's master light. Once pressed, the flashing stops, and the master light stays steadily lit. This confirms the crew has acknowledged the alert. The individual annunciator itself, like oil press low, will stay lit until the underlying fault is fixed. Now, advisory or status annunciators, they just illuminate steadily without flashing the master lights. They indicate a less urgent status change, like a system being turned on or active. The system also has automatic dimming for the annunciator panels. They adjust brightness based on ambient light, so they're always visible, but never too glaring or too dim.
Right. It's all about making sure the pilots see and understand the alerts without getting swamped. And speaking of critical info, airspeed and altitude monitoring are just fundamental, aren't they? Things you need to know even if other systems go dark.
Absolutely fundamental. The King Air 350 has a dedicated speed warning system. This isn't just something on the display. It's a separate dynamic pressure sensing device. It provides an oral warning, a distinct sound in the cockpit if the aircraft exceeds its VMOMO limits, the maximum operating speed, or Mach number. Crucially, this system operates independently of the main cockpit displays, so even if your screens had an issue, this would still warn you. If that warning sounds, immediate airspeed reduction is mandatory. Alongside that, there's a sophisticated stall warning system. It uses a lift computer, an oral warning horn, and a lift transducer. It's designed to give a precise pre-stall warning. It activates a tone based on the wing's lift coefficient and the flap position, giving the pilot crucial time to react before the wing actually stalls. It's even tied into the left landing gear squat switch, which helps prevent it from going off unnecessarily when you're on the ground.
So it's smarter than just a simple angle of attack sensor. It's more integrated. I also saw the source mentions airspeed altimeter tests. What do those involve? Are they automatic?
Yes, the instruments themselves have built-in self-test features, usually activated by a button push during pre-flight. For example, pressing the airspeed indicator test button might show a warning flag and briefly slew both pointers to a specific value, maybe 160 knots for a second, then back to 0. It confirms the instrument is alive and responding. A noteworthy detail. Transponder data transmission is inhibited during an airspeed test. This prevents sending bogus altitude info to air traffic control while the test is running. Similar tests exist for the altimeter, checking its accuracy and function.
Okay, let's get into the specifics of some key annunciators. The aircraft talks in this language of lights, but what are the really critical phrases we need to understand?
Exactly. The language uses color coding. Red means immediate danger, requires immediate action. Amber means caution, there's a system fault, needs timely attention. White usually indicates a system status, something you should be aware of. For example, a red oil PAR-ES low annunciator means exactly what it says, low oil pressure. Specifically, if it drops to 40 psi or below, this is a critical warning, indicates potential catastrophic engine damage if you don't address it immediately. Conversely, oil pressure between 60 and 90 psi is considered undesirable, requires reduced power, but below 60 psi. That's deemed unsafe and warrants immediate action like shutdown or landing ASAP, a critical distinction there.
Right, 40 psi is that absolute red line. Got it. What about problems with fuel transfer, maybe from auxiliary tanks?
You might see the amber NO FUEL XFR annunciator. This tells you the auxiliary fuel tank isn't transferring fuel to the main nacelle tank, usually because of some system issue. Fortunately, there's a manual override, so the pilot can try to force the transfer if necessary. Next, we have bleed fail LR. This is an amber light warning of excessive heat from a bleed airline rupture or leak. This is serious. It could affect cabin pressurization or pump superheated, unconditioned air into the cabin. And crucially, these lights do not go out when you turn the bleed air valve off. This tells you the physical problem, the leak or rupture, is still there, even if you stop the airflow through it.
That's an important point. It's warning about a persistent fault, not just a temporary status. What happens visually during a rapid depressurization?
You'll see cabin ALTI HI, white, and cabin altitude, white, light up, accompanied by urgent audio warnings. Demands immediate action. If you're running a test on the cabin pressure warning system, you'll see cabin diff HI, amber, illuminate during the test. For fire, the red EN fire, LR annunciator, lights up during an engine fire. It also indicates the firewall fuel shutoff valve is closed, cutting fuel, and the extinguisher system is armed. Following that, extinguisher push, LR, red, lights up when the extinguisher is armed and ready to fire. And once you push it and discharge the agent, the discharged LR red annunciator illuminates and stays lit until the used bottle is physically replaced. It serves as a clear flag for maintenance.
Those are clearly top priority warnings, immediate action needed. How do the avionics systems signal problems, especially the autopilot? That's so key for managing workload.
The red AP trim fail annunciator on autopilot-equipped planes is a critical warning. It means improper trim commands, maybe a trim runaway, or complete failure within the autopilot's trim system. The procedure is clear, absolute. Do not try to re-engage the autopilot. Similarly, if the autopilot's internal monitor detects a failure, the red AP fail annunciator lights up. You decouple the autopilot immediately, fly the aircraft manually. Again, no re-engagement attempts. If the electric elevator trim system disconnects, you'll see the yellow PTCH trim off light. This can often be reset by cycling the switch, but if it doesn't reset, you have to use the manual trim wheel.
I noticed there's an annunciator for auto feather too. That sounds like an important safety backup for engine out scenarios.
It is indeed. The Amber Auto FTHR off annunciator illuminates if the auto feather system isn't armed when the landing gear is extended. This is a crucial reminder. In critical phases like takeoff or landing, auto feather should be armed. The system is designed to automatically and quickly feather the propeller of a failed engine, drastically reducing drag and making the aircraft much easier to control. Oxygen system status is also clearly shown. An Amber OXY, not armed, advises the pilot to pull the control knob to arm the system. Once passenger oxygen masks drop and oxygen is flowing in the cabin, the white pass AUXY on-N annunciator illuminates, confirming the system is active for passengers. For the main entry door, an amber door unlocked light indicates the air stair door is either open, not properly latched, or not fully locked, critical for pressurization and structural integrity at altitude.
A comprehensive status check for the door, definitely needed. What about anti-ice and de-ice systems? How does the plane tell you those are working?
The L or RENG anti-ice light comes on when the corresponding engine anti-ice vane moves into position, confirming that system is active for potential icing. The fuel crossfeed annunciator lights up to show the crossfeed valve is open and fuel is actively flowing from one wing system to an engine on the opposite side. Normal operation, but needs to be clearly indicated. And for surface de-icing, the wing de-ice and tail de-ice lights illuminate to show the surface de-ice switch has been selected and the system is cycling. These are clear status indicators confirming these essential systems are engaged when you expect them to be. It's really a comprehensive suite of alerts designed to keep the crew informed about almost any significant change in the aircraft's status.
Okay, so the aircraft has done its part. It's given us a warning, maybe a flash of red or amber, perhaps an urgent beep or horn. Now what? This is where pilot action, clear procedures, and swift, well-informed decisions become absolutely paramount. It's the moment when all that training, all that knowledge about the limits and the warnings comes into sharp focus. Here's where you put it all into practice.
That's exactly the crux of it. You know, when things are going sideways in the cockpit, there's one golden rule that overrides everything else. A mantra we often call the 3 Rs. It starts with fly the aircraft. Think about it. Alarms might be blaring, lights flashing, but if you don't first keep that plane stable, keep it pointed in a safe direction, nothing else matters. Maintaining control is always the absolute top priority. Deviating from that can just compound an already critical situation. Let's start with the general principles of abnormal emergency procedures. In a 2-pilot crew, the crew designations are crystal clear. The pilot in command, PIC, designates who's flying the airplane, the pilot flying, PF, who's handling tasks like checklists and radios, the pilot monitoring, TM, and what specific things need monitoring. This clear division of labor is absolutely crucial for managing an emergency efficiently and safely. It prevents confusion when the pressure's on.
So there's no ambiguity about who does what when things get tense. And there's a difference between what you call memory items and regular checklist items, right? Why is that distinction so important?
Precisely. Memory items are those critical actions that must be done immediately from memory without looking at a checklist. Examples include the initial steps for an engine fire or certain critical throttle movements. These are practiced over and over until they're almost muscle memory because there's simply no time to grab the checklist first. For checklist usage, all other abnormal and emergency procedures use the printed checklist. The pilot reading the checklist states both the challenge, the item, and the response, the action or check. This ensures accuracy and verification. And for safety-critical controls, things like throttles, condition levers, fire switches, the pilot performing the action gets explicit verification from the other pilot before they move that control. This mandatory double check is designed to prevent catastrophic errors, like shutting down the wrong engine, especially under high stress.
That verification step makes total sense, especially under pressure. And for those really time-critical situations, you mentioned the 3 R's. Can you walk us through those dynamically?
Absolutely. The 3 R's are sequential. First, fly the aircraft, paramount. Maintain positive control above all else. Don't get so fixated on the problem that you forget to fly. Second, recognize challenge. Accurately analyze what's happening, what system failed, what are the indications telling you, understand the problem. And third, respond. Take the appropriate timely action. Usually this means executing those memory items first, then grabbing the appropriate checklist. This sequence ensures that basic safety flying the plane is never compromised. Now, for non-critical malfunctions where you have a bit more time, the response can be more deliberate, but the rule still applies. Always use the appropriate checklist to guide your corrective action. Taking your time reduces the chance of misdiagnosis or doing the wrong thing.
Okay, now let's talk about takeoff emergencies. These are arguably the highest stakes moments in flying, demanding rapid, decisive action with almost zero room for error.
Absolutely. A rejected takeoff, or RTO, is a pre-planned maneuver. Both crew members must be fully briefed on what conditions trigger an abort. Either pilot can call for the abort, though typically the pilot flying commands and executes it, especially if it's a control issue or something catastrophic. The general guideline is, prior to 80 kios, abort for any abnormality, any strange noise, any unexpected light. At lower speeds, usually have plenty of runway to stop safely. However, between 80 kios and V1, that critical takeoff decision speed, you typically abort only for specific major events. Engine failure, engine fire, or loss of directional control. Why the difference? Because as speed increases, stopping distance increases dramatically. After V1, you are generally committed to taking off because you likely won't have enough runway left to stop safely. You handle the emergency airborne.
So V1 is that critical gonna-go point. What's the exact procedure if you do have to reject below V1? It sounds like it happens incredibly fast.
It does. The procedure is swift, decisive. Immediately bring the power levers back to idly. Apply maximum braking. If you're on a slippery surface rain, snow, ice, drake, you'd use maximum reverse thrust on the operating engine, but carefully to avoid losing directional control from the asymmetrical thrust. If it looks like you might not stop on the remaining runway, the next steps are drastic but necessary. Both condition levers to fuel cutoff to stop fuel flow, close the fuel firewall valves, and turn the master switch off, usually by pulling down the gang bar to kill all electrical power. This helps shut down potential ignition sources or failing systems.
And the flip side, what if an engine fails at or above V1? Now you're committed to flying, but you're doing it on a single engine during a critical phase.
Correct. This is a takeoff continued scenario. First, increase power on the good engine to its maximum allowable setting. Crucially, maintain airspeed at or above your calculated takeoff safety speed, V2. Never let it decay below safe single-engine climb speeds. Retract the landing gear promptly to clean up the aircraft and reduce drag. If the auto feather system was on den, it's absolutely vital not to retard the power lever on the good engine until the propeller on the failed engine has completely feathered. Pulling power back too soon can interrupt that automatic sequence. Then you manually confirm or complete feathering the inoperative engine's propeller to minimize drag. Continue the climb at V2 until you're safely clear of all obstacles, then retract the flaps. Finally, you complete the engine shutdown checklist. Condition lever on the dead engine to fuel cutoff, close its fuel firewall valve, turn off its auto feather, engine auto ignition, and gen switches. And throughout all this, you must continuously monitor the electrical load on the operating generator to make sure you don't overload it.
Let's shift to a scenario no pilot ever wants. Fire on board. What are the immediate actions for an engine fire, whether you're in the air or still on the ground?
For an engine fire in flight, the actions are immediate memory items, critical. First, affected engine's condition lever to fuel cutoff, stop the fuel flow. Second, affected engine's firewall fuel valve handle to close. Double barrier against fuel feeding the fire. You verify the red extinguisher push annunciator illuminates, confirming the system is armed. Only then do you discharge the extinguisher. Lift the plastic guard to press the switch firmly. The discharged light will come on and stay lit, telling you the agent has been fired. For an engine fire on ground, the initial steps are similar. Affected engine condition lever to fuel cutoff, firewall valve closed. Verify extinguisher's push light is on. Then you select the starter switch for that engine to starter only and monitor the fire. Sometimes the airflow from motoring the engine can actually blow out a small fire. If the fire persists after motoring, then you press the extinguisher push switch to discharge the agent.
These are absolutely memory items, actions that have to happen almost instinctively, no time to fumble for a checklist. Okay, moving to pressurization and environmental emergencies. A rapid cabin depressurization sounds terrifying. What's the immediate protocol?
It is terrifying, and speed, reacting quickly, is absolutely essential. For rapid cabin depressurization emergency descent, the immediate memory items are, first, crew oxygen masks on N. Select mask communications so you can talk. Second, execute a maximum performance descent. Get down as fast as safely possible to denser air. You need to confirm passenger oxygen masks deployed. Turn engine ignition switches on N. This is crucial to prevent engine flameouts during the rapid descent through potentially disturbed air or varying atmospheric conditions. Advise air traffic control immediately of your emergency. Set your transponder to the emergency code 7700. The descent must be rapid. You're racing against the clock to minimize the time spent at high altitude where the risk of hypoxia, lack of oxygen is high. Unconsciousness can happen very quickly.
What about something like a cracked windshield? My instinct says that's bad, but is it always a land immediately situation, or is there some nuance there?
You're right, there's nuance. If it's only the outer ply of the windshield that's cracked, unpressurized flight may be possible. The key conditions are, the cracking must not significantly impair the pilot's visibility, and it shouldn't interfere with the windshield wipers if you need them. Critically, if you expect any icing conditions, the windshield heating elements must be working. And there's a very specific placard required in the cockpit. It reads, "Due to a crack in the windshield, pressurized flight is prohibited. Conduct flights with bleed air valve switches in inver off Passesia and cabin press switch in dump position." This ensures no one accidentally tries to pressurize the cabin with that compromised outer pane, which could lead to a much more catastrophic failure of the entire windshield.
And what if you get a bleed air warning, like that Amber LR bleed fail annunciator, indicating a problem with the air source for pressurization and air conditioning?
An Amber LR bleed fail light indicates a bleed airline rupture or leak. This generates excessive heat near the leak and can lead to a loss of air for pressurization or heating cooling. A key detail here: these lights stay lit even after you shut off the bleed air valve for that engine. It tells you there's a persistent physical fault, not just a temporary issue. The procedure involves immediately setting the affected engine's bleed air valve switch to new and NVIR off. You then monitor the cabin VSI, vertical speed indicator, and the pneumatic pressure gauge closely for any signs of ongoing depressurization or system issues. The brake dice should also be turned off, as it uses bleed air. Then you'd switch the ECS, environmental control system, to man heat. Hold the man temp switch to desair for about 30 seconds to purge any superheated air from the ducts, and then manually adjust the temperature for cabin comfort.
Okay, shifting to hydraulic system emergencies. If the normal landing gear extension fails, it sounds like there's a backup plan.
Yes, absolutely. In aviation, redundancy is key for critical systems. If you have a hydraulic system failure preventing normal landing gear extension, the standard procedure is to perform a manual gear extension. There's a specific handle or system for that, essentially using gravity and aerodynamic forces to allow the gear to fall and lock into place. Now, if the HYD FO LEAD low annunciator comes on during flight, the first step is to plan on attempting a normal gear extension when you arrive at your destination. However, if the gear then fails to extend normally using the primary system, you would immediately follow the established procedures for manual landing gear extension. This layered approach ensures critical systems like landing gear have multiple ways to deploy, even if the primary system fails.
The environment outside can throw curveballs too, like severe turbulence or icing. How does the King Air 350 deal with in-flight environmental and control emergencies like those?
For turbulent air penetration, there's a very specific set of actions. The recommended target speed is 170 kis. You should turn the auto ignition system on to help prevent engine flameouts in severe chop. Set the power to maintain that 170 knots and only make small adjustments for extreme speed variations. Don't chase the airspeed. If the autopilot is not engaged, use moderate, smooth control inputs. Prioritize keeping the wings level and maintaining your desired pitch attitude using the attitude indicator as your main reference. Importantly, allow the altitude to vary somewhat. Don't aggressively chase altitude or airspeed, as that can induce more stress on the airframe. And crucially, make no pitch trim changes after setting up for penetration speed. Make sure the yaw damper is engaged to help reduce side-to-side oscillations. If the autopilot is engaged, use the soft ride mode if available and turn off any altitude hold, speed hold, or vertical speed modes. Let the autopilot gently ride the waves. And of course, turn on the fasten seatbelt sign for passenger safety.
That sounds like a very proactive, controlled way to handle rough air. What about operation in icing conditions? How does the King Air handle something as potentially dangerous as ice buildup?
The King Air 350 is approved for flight in certain icing conditions, typically what's defined by regulations like FAR Part 25, Appendix C, often called known icing conditions. But it's critical to understand this approval doesn't cover all severe icing, like freezing rain, freezing drizzle, or severe mixed conditions. Think of it like wearing a winter coat, good for cold, maybe light snow, but not designed for a blizzard where ice can build up faster than the systems can shed it. The anti-ice system's engine inlets, windshield, props, pitot tubes, fuel vents, stall warning sensor heat should always be activated before you enter visible moisture where icing might occur. Prevent it from forming in the first place. The surface de-icer, the inflatable boots on the wings and tail, is typically activated after you see about ½ an inch to an inch of ice accumulate. It's designed to shed ice that has already formed. Remember, engine anti-ice should be used for all ground ops in potential icing conditions and airborne invisible moisture when the outside air temperature, OAT, is +5 degrees C or colder.
And a highly critical, but thankfully mostly training scenario, stall recognition and recovery. What's the protocol for that? Keeping in mind this is usually practiced, not encountered unexpectedly.
Yes, and this comes with a huge, crucial caveat. Deliberate stalls should only be done in supervised pilot training, with extreme caution and strict safety protocols. Practice should be done no lower than 5,000 feet above the ground, cockpit clear, area clear of other traffic. At the very first indication of a stall, which is usually the stall warning horn sounding, you must immediately initiate recovery. No hesitation. The steps are: 1. Autopilot RFF. 2. Pitch reduce the angle of attack smoothly but positively. Push forward on the yoke, trimming as needed. 3. Bank level the wings. 4. Propellers high RPM, levers full forward. 5. Throttles increase power smoothly to maximum allowable. 6. Recover controlled flight, usually accelerating back towards VREF, reference landing speed. For a stall practiced in a takeoff or departure configuration like flaps approach gear up, the recovery steps are the same, but you might stop trimming at a specific climb speed like 125 Kias. The absolute emphasis is on immediate, decisive action to reduce the angle of attack and regain controlled flight at the first sign of trouble.
Finally, let's touch on engine oil system emergencies. Specifically, that low oil pressure indication we mentioned earlier. It sounds like an immediate concern.
It is. If you get that low oil pressure, oil PRES annunciator, indicating pressure below 40 psi, it's considered unsafe. Demands immediate action. This requires either an immediate engine shutdown, following the checklist, or if shutdown isn't feasible right away, landing at the nearest suitable airport using minimum required power to sustain flight. However, if the oil pressure is between 60 and 90 psi, it's considered undesirable, but doesn't necessarily mandate an immediate shutdown. In this case, the procedure is generally to complete the flight at a reduced power setting, not exceeding 62% torque, to minimize further stress on the engine and monitor it closely. It's a clear distinction. Below 60 is unsafe, requiring drastic action, while 60-90 is a caution zone requiring careful management and a modified flight plan.
So we've meticulously gone through the mechanical safeguards, the procedural boundaries, the engineering that defines the King Air 350's limits, and those intricate warning systems designed to alert the crew. But the most important component in any aircraft, especially one this capable, it's the one with the pulse, right? The flight crew. It's their skill, their judgment, their teamwork that ultimately ensures these complex procedures are executed flawlessly, turning raw data and warnings into safe outcomes.
That's the perfect way to frame it. In this world of ever-increasing automation, why does the human element remain so critical? It's because the ultimate synthesis of information, making real-time judgments, adapting to truly unexpected, non-standard events that still rests with the crew. Their training, their coordination, their adherence to established protocols, that's paramount. It represents the final and arguably most crucial layer of safety. Let's talk about standard operating procedures, SOPs, and checklists. These are the absolute backbone of good crew coordination and safety. The core philosophy here is that disciplined, consistent use of well-developed SOPs is central to safe, professional flying, especially in multi-crew aircraft, complex planes, high-performance machines like the King Air 350. They ensure consistency, predictability in all phases of flight. They leave less to chance, less to improvisation under pressure.
So it's not just about doing the tasks, but doing them the same way, the right way, every single time. This seems incredibly important for preventing errors.
Exactly. For normal procedures, tasks are often done using flow patterns. Pilots use the physical layout of the cockpit as intuitive cues to move from one switch or control to the next in a logical sequence, or sometimes event-based sequences like an after-takeoff flow. These flows, whether physical or mental, are then typically followed by a challenge-response review using the checklist, usually read by the pilot not flying, PNF, verifying each item is correctly set. For abnormal emergency procedures, the process is slightly different because the stakes are higher. The designated crew member performs the checklist items using a challenge response method, but here, the pilot reading the list states both the challenge, the item, and the expected response, the action or check. And remember that verification step for critical controls. Throttles, fire switches. The pilot performing the action must get explicit confirmation from the other pilot before touching that control. That mandatory double check prevents potentially disastrous mistakes.
That verification is so vital, especially when stress is high. And those critical memory items we discussed earlier, how do they fit into this SOP framework?
Memory items, by definition, are procedures needing immediate action without a checklist. They are practiced extensively until they are automatic. The source gives a clear example for an engine fire. Left condition lever fuel cutoff, left firewall valve closed. This explicit detail, sometimes including the relative position, left, right, inboard, outboard, is often stated aloud by the performing pilot and verified by the monitoring pilot, even though it's a memory item. Why? To ensure absolute clarity and prevent, say, inadvertently shutting down the good engine when dealing with controls that have left and right versions.
Beyond the procedures themselves, the clear definition of crew roles and responsibilities must be absolutely essential for things to run smoothly, especially when things get busy. How do pilots divide those duties?
It's absolutely essential. The distinction between the pilot flying, PF, and pilot monitoring, PM, is fundamental. It clearly outlines who does what during normal operations and during critical transitions. For example, during the takeoff role, the PM typically makes the standard speed calls, 80 knots, V1, rotate. This frees up the PS mental bandwidth to focus solely on flying the aircraft and maintaining directional control. It's smart workload management. During engine starting, the roles are often explicitly divided. The pilot actually manipulating the start controls monitors the critical parameters like ITT, turbine temperature, N1, gas generator speed, and that crucial 10-second limit for light off. Meanwhile, the other pilot, acting as PM, monitors the starter time limits and all other engine indications and potential abnormalities, providing verbal CALATs like oil pressure rising, ignition on, fuel pressure good. This division prevents both pilots from staring at the same gauge while potentially missing another critical indication.
That's a great example of focused workload sharing. What about things like radio calls and navigation?
Generally, for radio tuning and communication, the PM handles tuning navigation and communication radios, identifying navigation aids, and handling most communication with air traffic control, especially on the ground. Again, this frees the PF to concentrate on flying the aircraft, managing the flight path, and maintaining situational awareness. And when it comes to altitude assignment, which is incredibly critical for safety, the PM typically sets the assigned altitude in the altitude alerter system, points directly at the alerter display, orally repeats the assigned altitude, and keeps pointing until the PF verbally confirms both the altitude assignment and the alerter setting. This closed-loop communication ensures both pilots are completely synchronized on that critical altitude clearance, minimizing the risk of level busts.
Finally, the preparation that happens before the flight even starts the pre-departure briefings. I imagine these are much more than just a quick chat about the weather.
Oh, crucial. Absolutely crucial. The pilot in command conducts a pre-departure briefing before every flight. It addresses potential problems, discusses weather, highlights safety considerations, covers any relevant operational issues. These briefings include all flight crew members, and sometimes cabin crew, too. It enhances team building, sets the tone for the flight, and fosters a shared mental model of how the operation is expected to proceed. The AWARE acronym is often used as a memory aid to cover standard items, abort considerations, weather, any questions, all threats, runway conditions, and emergency procedures, exterior factors. It's also the perfect opportunity to brief any planned deviations from standard procedures due to weather, runway conditions, or specific ATC instructions. It ensures everyone is on the same page, ready for both the planned flight and any potential contingencies. It's truly the culmination of all these elements, the known limits, the warning systems, the practice procedures, and this vital human coordination that underpins the incredible safety record of modern aviation.
Wow, what a journey we've just taken. For those intricate airspeed limits and system-specific boundaries, all the way to the decisive, sometimes split-second actions needed in an engine fire or a rapid decompression. We've really seen how precision, clear procedures, and that meticulous crew coordination are just woven into the very fabric of the King Air 350's safe operation. Hopefully, you've gained an essential understanding, not just of what the limits are, but why they exist, and the critical responses that keep this incredible aircraft and everyone on board safe when the unexpected happens.
And this deep dive into the King Air 350's specifics, it raises, I think, an important question for you, our listener, to maybe ponder. How do these incredibly detailed operational limits and emergency plans designed for a complex machine like this, how do they mirror the principles of preparedness and risk management in your own life? Or maybe your own profession? Think about the power of truly knowing your own limits, understanding the warning signs your systems might be giving you, and having a clear, maybe even well-rehearsed plan for when the unexpected inevitably arises. That same disciplined approach that keeps an aircraft safe thousands of feet in the air. It can offer some pretty profound lessons for navigating challenges right here on the ground.
That's a powerful thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the King Air 350. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time for another journey into knowledge.